Hello, fellow artists, and welcome back to the Canvas Academy. Today, we're kicking off a new course series here on the Academy, and this one is all about flowers and petals. Alright, so we're going to be doing a lot of creating flowers, a lot of roses, just a bunch of different kind of flowers, basically anything that has a petal on it, right? So, that's what we're going to be doing in this course. And today, we're going to be starting off with our special hybrid, as I like to call it. It's half acrylic painting, half watercolor painting, all in one class for you. And today we're going to be using these acrylic and watercolor techniques to make some fancy tulips, as you can see, as we've got on our sketch. As always, make sure you get your sketch all prepped and ready to go before starting the class. Link below to get the PDF file for the sketch. Remember, you can always trace it yourself or print it out. See our how to draw without actually drawing video, also linked below, so that you can know how to do that if you haven't done that yet on our Academy. But this is going to be a nice, quick, and hopefully easy enough, right? Acrylic and watercolor painting class today. So this is going to be a lot of fun. Alright, so get ready, get your paints out, all your materials and everything, like what I've got here. We are going to be using, since we're doing acrylic and watercolor painting, you'll need something to mix your acrylic paint on and something to mix your watercolor paints in. I usually use these little, they're kind of cheapy, flimsy, but you know, these little things, these little palettes with the little cups in them, right? Sometimes they're shaped like a big circle. They come in different shapes and sizes than just this. If you don't have one of these, you can always just use like shot glasses, you guys, or little cups, even little solo cups like what I've got my regular water in. Works great. Something to mix your paint with, whatever you've got available, doesn't matter. And of course a paintbrush, right? And today I'm going for a small to medium round head brush. That's the only brush we're going to be using for this class. Now for our paints, you're actually only going to need 4 tubes of paint today. Yay, right? Kind of a rarity to have so few tubes of paint, but we're going to need all 3 of our primary colors. Remember, some type of yellow, some type of yellow, some type of red, and some type of blue. And our white. These are the 4 colors that we're going to be using for today. And as per the usual, we're going to be using acrylic paints straight out of the tube. And we're actually going to make our own watercolor paints out of those acrylic paints, right? We've done that a lot here before. If you haven't done it with me yet, prepare to have your mind blown, right? But let's go on ahead and get started by mixing our acrylic paints first, and then we're going to take some of those colors and turn them into watercolors. So first, for the main colors of our tulip petals that we're going to be working with today, you're going to need some type of pink, alright? And to make pink, if you didn't already know this, y'all, it's just good old red and good old white, right? That's how we make a pink. And the more red you add, the more of like a hot pink it's going to be. The more white you add, the more of a light pink it's going to be. So you kind of get to choose. But to begin off today, I do want to do 2 different shades of pink. I want to do a darker shade and a lighter shade. So don't go too light to start. I'm going to do quite a bit of red. And you can do this with me now. Getting your paints all out and ready to go. I'll do quite a bit of red right here. And then maybe like a third of that I'll do with white. I'll do like 2/3 of red and 1/3 of white. And then we'll see what we get from there. Again, I want to just add small amounts at a time. I don't want to make it too light to start because we're going to make a lighter shade of pink too. So taking my mixing tool, we can start mixing this up. And I think this is definitely going to be light enough. So you guys, I did about 2/3 of red and 1/3 of white with my paint, if that's what you want to do too, to start. You can even, if you mix that up, you can even make this a little bit lighter if you want to, but not too much lighter. So it is getting this like hot pink kind of look to it. Hot, right? Hot and spicy. Alright, so you can keep mixing up if you need to. You can always pause the video. You guys pause the video at any time if things move a little bit too fast for you. I don't want you to rush or anything. We don't want to rush our painting. So, but if you're ready to move on, right next to this color, I'm going to put down a big old glob of white. Not a huge glob, but you know, a decent sized dollop of white right next to that. Like about that much. And then from there, I'm actually going to take a little bit of this pink we just mixed right on the end of my mixing tool. And I'm just going to take this glob and I'm just going to drop it right in here without splattering everywhere. But I'm going to drop it right in the white, and then I'm going to start mixing it from there. So now we're just making a lighter version of the color we just made. You can always kind of wipe your spatula in the paint there to get, there we go, get some of that extra off. So we use every drop of paint we've got, right? We don't want to waste paint ever. Kind of wipe that there. Now I'm going to go on ahead and I'm going to wipe my mixing tool off on my napkin I've got over here. Now, also for our tulip petals, we're going to want some plain red and then some type of orange, kind of a reddish orange hue. Alright, so to do that, first of all, we're going to drop in just a good old medium-sized dollop of red somewhere here. Just that'll probably be enough. Doesn't have to be too much. And then we're going to leave that just straight out of the tube red because that's what we're going to be using for our shading in our acrylic tulips, at least today. And then next that we want to make kind of an orangish that's going to be kind of like highlighted in our tulips too, both our acrylic and our watercolor tulips when we get to that part. And to do that, we're going to start off by using our yellow. Actually, I might get a different tube. Just a little bit of yellow. I'm going to actually switch over and use a tube of craft paint really quickly because my other yellow is pretty much gone at this point and I need to get another one out. But this one's just laying nearby, so you can always use craft paint. Like I always say, you guys, craft paint, it is acrylic paint, right? Magic, right? If you didn't already know that, it'll help you save some money, right? If you can't afford to get the fancy tubes of the acrylic paint, or if you ever run out of acrylic paint, you can always use any craft paint you have on hand. As long as it says acrylic on the bottle, it'll definitely work, right? For both our regular acrylic painting and our watercolor painting, as I splasher it all over my arm, okay? You will notice it just won't be as thick. This kind is just not as thick as my other tubes of acrylic paint, but that's totally fine, right? It'll still work. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take, just like we did, I'm bringing some of this pink into the white over here to make the lighter pink. I'm just going to get a little bit at a time of this red we just poured out on the tip of my tool. And I'm going to start mixing that into my yellow. And yes, this is very thin, but I'm going to keep mixing it up into my yellow. There we go. So you guys, craft paint totally works. I use it all the time, just as I'm showing you here. I wouldn't tell you to use it if I didn't trust it. I do trust it, alright? Especially if you're a beginner, if you're just practicing, right? You don't always want to use like the nicest paints you can find right away because you may not know. You may not even know the difference between like really high quality paints and craft paint just yet. Not that craft paint is like low quality or anything, it's just, it is less expensive and it is thinner, right? So you can tell that this is a lot thinner than that other stuff I was using. But again, totally fine because it's going to work for what we're doing today. You can keep working with it. I think mine is still a little bit on the yellow side. It's kind of a tannish. I want it, it's like a tannish orange right now. And I do want it to lean more towards being like a little bit of a darker orange. So I'm going to add some more red. If I can scoop some of it up here. Ooh, there we go. I'm getting a little bit messy with my red there. If you need to pour some more red out in place of the red you're taking away, that's totally fine too. And there, that's a little bit more of the orangish because it's a little bit of a pinkish orange of what I'm going for. And that's, yes, that's definitely the color I'm going for there. But like I say, any type of acrylic paint you can get your hands on is totally fine. Also, any variation of colors that you can find is totally cool too. Like that craft paint I just used, it was actually not a pure yellow. I think it's like a light yellow. We'll see what the bottle says, I guess, while you're mixing that up. This is Pale Daffodil, so it's a little bit lighter. You see it compared to my regular acrylic. See, it's a lot lighter of a yellow. But again, it's just giving us like different variations of colors, so the colors you're mixing at home are inevitably going to be different than these, even just slightly, right? Even if you were to buy this exact tube of paint that's the yellow medium, right? And you use this exact tube of paint in your mixing and stuff, whatever you're doing at home today, you're inevitably probably going to get a different color mixed anyway, just because different ratios of the color you add, and you know, just when we're mixing colors, you're not going to get it the same every single time, alright? I just like to tell people that, just so you know. I mean, you want to get it as close as you can to these colors that I'm mixing here on my palette, but if it's not perfect, you guys, it's totally fine. It's still going to get you a really pretty picture, right? And it's going to be your own, mixing up your own colors, and you're going to make a painting with your own colors you have on hand. Just making it more unique, right? Alright, I think that's enough mixing on that one. Definitely enough. Oh man, I really like that color that craft paint turned out. It's like lighter. And you know, you guys, if you used a darker yellow and yours turned up like a darker orange and you kind of wanted to get more of what I've got here, just add a little bit of white to it, right? You can always play around with your colors as you're mixing, you guys. Just add a little bit of white to it if you want to lighten it up, right? If you want to darken it down a little bit, you can add a little bit more red. You want to make it a little bit more yellow, add some more yellow. Just play around with your colors as we're mixing today. Now, somewhere over here, we also need to make some version of green, obviously for our stems and our leaves today, right? So if you have green acrylic paint, like a tube of it, you can always just pour some of that right out on your palette. If not, you can do what I'm going to do, and I'm going to mix my own. And as per the usual, to make our own green, it's just a little bit of blue and quite a bit of yellow. A little bit more yellow than blue, because blue can kind of overwhelm green pretty easily. But that's how we make our own green. So I'm going to start by using this lovely Crafter's yellow paint that I got here. I'm actually really enjoying this color, not even going to lie. Very interesting too, because yellow is my least favorite color, okay? So I'm going to put a little bit of blue, kind of just on the side, there we go. Not very much to start. I'm going to see how my Crafter's paint works with me. But again, I would do, if you're using regular acrylic paint or using both types or Crafter's paint, I would do about 2/3 of yellow to about 1/3 of blue. It just doesn't look like I have that much blue here because this blue is thicker than the yellow. But I'm going to mix it up and see what I get, and then I'm going to go from there using our own judgments, right, as we're mixing our colors, as to see if we need to add more of something or not. This is giving me a really pale yellowish green. I actually kind of like that too. It's kind of like a minty green. Yeah, I kind of like that. But again, whatever color of green you have on hand or that you're mixing up, any variation of green is totally going to work for this. It doesn't really matter. I actually kind of like that green. I'm going to leave it as is. You can always add some more stuff to it if you need to add more yellow. You know, you want to add more blue. Play around with it. Add some more white if you want to lighten yours up a little bit. You know, whatever you want to do to make up your own green today. And then somewhere else on our palette, we're going to need a little bit of white. Just plain white right out of the tube. Nothing done with it. Not going to do anything to it. Just a little bit of white that we can use for our highlights today, especially with our stems, we are going to highlight the stems and the leaves with some white. And now, once we finally have all of our color mixing done for our acrylic paint, we are actually going to need to take some time now to mix up our watercolor paint. Yay! Mixing paint. It's taking a little bit longer than usual today. Just saying, if this is your first class, it normally doesn't take this long, but since we're doing acrylic paint and watercolor paint, we have to mix up both. So I'm actually going to put my painting to the side, my sketch to the side for a minute. And then I'm going to bring in my little watercolor palette, or whatever you have on hand. If you have like little shot glasses, little cups, even little like bowls or glasses that you use in the kitchen, totally works. Anything you've got. Just something that's going to hold the water in, right? Because it's going to get pretty liquidy when we add the water to our watercolor paint. So now you're going to have to add some little amounts of water to your whatever you've got, whether it's little divots, I like to call them, in your watercolor palette or your little cups, whatever you've got. You're going to add just tiny amounts, a couple of drops at a time, of water to them. And I think we're going to be making 4 colors of watercolor today, so you need 4 cups or 4 little divots of a palette that you're going to need to fill with a little bit of water. I'm going to be using my handy dandy plastic straw, right, that I use specifically for this task, because I'm going to show you how I like to fill these is by using this thing like a dropper, right? So if you need to pause and go grab one of these, that'd be a great idea. Or if you actually have a rubber dropper, you know, that would be like, you'd be a rock star, because I don't know who has those laying around in their house, but if you've got one, use it, because this is the perfect time to use it, right? And if you don't have any of the above, you don't have a straw or a dropper, you can always just take whatever cup you have full of water, and you can just very carefully, you know, pour. I don't trust myself to do it, but if you have like maybe a smaller cup full of water or something with a spout, that you can just pour a couple of drops into 4 of your watercolor palettes today. But I'm going to use my handy dandy trusty straw. If I can get some water in there. And I'm going to drop it into here. That was actually kind of a lot. I'll just kind of move it over to the next one. There we go. See, I'm not getting it all the way to the top today, but I don't know if you can really see on the camera, but just about to the top. Just a couple of drops into each of your things. There we go. It doesn't really take that much water, right? And if you're doing these in little shot glasses and stuff, really just enough to just barely fill the bottom of it. That's really all you're going to need today. So I've got these water filled in 4 of my little spouts, if you want to call them that. Now I'm going to move my cup aside and bring this over. Now what we're going to be doing is taking the 4 colors that we're going to be using for our watercolor tulips, and we're going to put a little bit of each color into each of these little cups that we just put the water in, and we're going to start stirring it up to create our watercolor. If you're confused, it's alright. Just stick it out with me here, and this is gonna be great. All right, our picture is gonna be so great today, you guys. Trust me on this. So our 4 colors that we're going to make are going to be our dark pink that we mixed up, our light pink that we mixed up, our orangish color that we mixed up, and our green that we mixed up. So a little bit of each of these 4. You don't need very much, and we're going to mix one of those in each of our little cups. So, for example, I'm going to take about this much of the darker pink right on the tip of my mixing tool. Whether you've got a spatula or like little craft sticks or even a butter knife, whatever you've got as your mixing tool today. And I'm just going to pick a cup here, and I'm going to start swirling it in there. And it's going to start making the water change colors. And that is actually what's going to create watercolor for us today. Really nice and simple, not too complicated. You can kind of wipe it on the side of your little mixing cup. And then wipe your spatula off in between each color. Next, I'm going to take some of my light pink on the end of my tool. I'm going to pick another little cup here. I'm going to start stirring it into this one. I'm gonna wipe it down the side of the cup. There we go. Just stirring it in there, getting that acrylic nice and wet so that it slowly turns into watercolor for us. Yeah. Wiping it off again. I'm gonna pick another color and another spot. I'm going for my orange. I'm gonna put it in this one here on the corner. Oh, these colors are so pretty. Gorgeous, really. I'm sure yours are turning out fabulously as well. Right, very pretty colors. Oh, I can't wait. These tulips are going to be amazing, you guys. Okay, now my green for the last little cup. Always when I'm doing this, it scrapes the bottom of the cup and it makes these really ooey sounds, right? Alright. Then, once you've got your 4 colors all reared and ready to go, you guys, it's actually time. We're going to start painting. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and we're actually going to start with doing a little bit of watercolor paint today. We're going to do a little bit, half of our watercolor painting, and then we're going to do our acrylic painting, and then we're going to come back and finish the watercolor. You'll see why in a second. Don't worry, there is a method to it. So I'm going to put my acrylic palette to the side for now. I'm going to gently bring my watercolor over here. You can move your little cups or your palette to the side as well. Move this over just a little bit. And bring in my picture again. Now that I got stuff on it from the... I think that was on the back of my acrylic palette. I don't know why I got it on there. Oh well. Anyway, we're going to go ahead and get ready to get started painting here. So to start off, since we are doing, I'm going to bring this back in a little bit closer now. Doing a watercolor, we're going to need to get our paintbrush nice and wet to start. Really, really nice and wet. And now let me just explain really quickly what we're going to do. So for some of these classes that we do with the watercolor, sometimes I like to give you a sketch of where the watercolor parts of the picture actually go. And other times I don't, because I want you to have not only the freedom to choose where you're going to put your watercolor down, but also the chance to not have the sketch lines get in your way, right? Whether you sketch them or you printed them, especially if you print your pictures, you guys, when you print the sketch, sometimes it works great with acrylic paint, right? But sometimes the watercolor paint, because it's so liquidy, it makes the ink kind of seep through from the printer, and we don't want that, right? Or if you sketch it, and then sometimes when we do the watercolor, sometimes the lines like show through the paint because it's so thin, and I don't want that today either. So for today's watercolor painting portion, we're not going to have any lines guiding us, so this is going to be a bit of a free paint, alright? But don't panic, I'm here to guide you. You can always reference and see what I'm doing as we're going along. But first what we're going to do is we're going to create kind of a tulip bouquet of watercolor tulips behind our two. These are going to be our acrylic painted tulips today, okay? These two we're going to paint in acrylic paint after we get done with this part. So first we're going to make some of the tulip petals around. And to do this, I want you to start, you can pick any color except for green. We're not going to use green yet, right? No green, we're just doing the petals to start. So any of these 3 colors that we created for the petals, you can actually choose any color you like. I'm going to start with this dark pink. And essentially what we're going to do is we're going to start by creating 2 curves, the 2 under petals of each tulip. And you get to make as many tulips as you want, alright? So you can watch what I'm doing first if you don't quite understand yet. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to make here, like this. Here's a curve. And then from the bottom up, here's another curve. Alright? Kind of like a U shape. We're kind of making like a wide U shape. Alright? So we're going to make a couple of these just around and behind these two front petals. Be mindful not to do too many that you get a little bit carried away, right? Just making some wide U's here. I'm going to do, I think, 3 in this dark pink, and then I'm going to switch colors. And kind of just let the paint flow off of the tip of your brush as you're doing this. It is watercolor, right? So it's water-based. It's going to be really flowy. That was a little bit more of a V, like with a V in the middle of that shape, but this is just the general shape that we're going for. You can play around and do some different, like some wider, wide U's and then some smaller, thinner V's. Now I'm going to clean my brush and I'm going to go on and do a different color. More with this color here. I'll put one kind of up here, so I'm kind of varied, not all on one level, right? That one's more of a V too. And I think I'm going to do one more in my light pink color, somewhere up here. So again, this is a part where you get to play around, right? You get to pick how many of these little U-shape, these tulip bottoms, I guess we can call them, tulip butts, right? That you're going to put down on your picture, right? In this general area up here. You get to pick how many and what kinds of colors, right? Artist choice, you get to pick. I'm going to do one more in this light pink, I think, up here. Right, yeah, right in here. This one ended up a little bit bigger, but that's okay. Now, while these are still a little bit wet, once you get your brush wet again, and if you're still making your base tulips, putting them down, that's totally fine, take your time. But now I want to go on ahead and we're going to drop in little bits of other colors to each of these, right? Just one at a time. So I'm going to start from my left, I'm going to go left to right, you can do this also, and see that this one is a darker pink. So I'm going to pick either my orange or my light pink. You can watch me for a moment. I'm just going to take a little bit, I'm going to use the orange, just because. And get the end of my brush really nice and wet with that color, and then I'm just going to drop it in here like this, and it's going to start to flow into the watercolor that's already there, right? You can also kind of wipe it in there too, see, like that. So it's giving us kind of a little bit of a highlight of color there. It's very, very subtle. You may not even really see it on the camera, but it's very, very subtle. And moving on to my next one then, seeing how this one was orange in color. So now I'm going to try to drop in some of my dark pink to it. I get quite a bit of that on my brush. I'm just going to kind of drop it in. And just kind of wipe it through, right? Wipe it kind of through the middle of the flower. Middle to the end, or middle to the middle. You know what I mean? We're just dropping in little bits of color to it. So it's a little bit varied. I clean my brush after each one just to keep it nice and clean so we don't contaminate these colors, but if you forget to wash it once or twice, that's totally fine. I'm going to move on to my next one to the right. This is a lighter pink. I think for this one I'm also going to drop in a little bit of dark pink. See, this is the joy of watercolor, you guys, is watching it kind of flow as you just barely even sometimes touch that paint to the page. we're just creating little lines on here that are going to be like our highlights or our lowlights, right? Just different variations of color in there. Not too tricky. Now, for my last two dark pink ones here, I think I'm going to add some of my orange color to them. I'll do the same to this one here. But I really do want you guys go at your own pace here and go with what you've got going on with your picture. I want you to make your own, you know, choices as an artist. Choices of color, choices of placement, where you want to put your watercolor tulips and what colors you want to make them and what highlights you want to put on. You know, you get a lot of choice with this. That's kind of the main thing, right? Now, if you need to pause and finish doing those, that's totally fine. I'm going to go ahead and clean my brush pretty well. And now, we're actually going to switch gears. Switching gears, right? Because now, what I want is, since this is watercolor and it's water-based, it's going to take a little bit of time to dry before we do the next step on them. They're not finished yet, don't panic, right? Don't worry about that. But we are going to let them dry a little bit first before we do our next step to them. So in between doing those steps, we're going to switch and just work on our acrylic painting, right? This is going to save us a bunch of time so we don't have to wait on that forever and ever. So I'm going to put my watercolors over here to the side and bring back in our acrylic paints. So now we're going to start with our painting our acrylic petals. So now, for these, I'm going to go, I think I'm going to go left to right with our petals, all right? So we'll start on this one, and then we'll do this one. We'll start with these petals before we do the right side of this flower, you know, that sort of thing. Now to start, now things are going to feel a little bit different because acrylic paint is thicker, right? It's not going to flow as much on the page like that watercolor was doing, all right? So we have to look at things a little bit differently now. And now we're going to use a lot of blending and technique, right? So it's gonna be a little bit different. But to start, I just want you to go on ahead and we're going to fill in this whole petal here. Starting off, we're gonna fill this whole petal in with our dark pink to start. Kind of going right up to the edge of all of our sketch lines. You can go over the lines a little bit, that's totally fine. I mean, not on purpose, but if you do go over them a little bit, that's fine. Because acrylic paint is really easy to fix. Watercolor paint, what we did up there is kind of set in stone. Like, sorry to say, it's going to be a little bit permanent like that. But with our acrylic paint, if we kind of make some mishaps, we can always go back and change things as we're moving along. Even after the paint dries, we can still fix it. Again, we're just going to fill in this whole petal here with this dark pink. Right? And pause if you need to at any time, right? But now we're going to highlight it a little bit. And to do that, I'm not going to wipe my brush off. I'm actually going to leave the paint I have on here, right? Because now I'm not so worried about contaminating other colors when I'm doing acrylic paint. Remember how I said you want to wash your brush in between each color when you're doing watercolor, because the wet paint, it can get contaminated pretty quickly. Acrylic paint, it's thick, and it's like if I just put my brush into the side of this, it's not going to contaminate it with the other colors. So I am actually going to go ahead and dip the tip of my brush in my orange over here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to follow from this top edge here all the way down. I'm going to kind of create a line with this orange all the way down. And then I'm going to kind of swipe over it a few times to get it kind of, there we go, blend it in. You can add some more on your brush, you need to. So we're going to keep bringing this orange in and keep swiping it down along this outer edge, well, inner edge really, of the petal. This is going to create a really nice highlight on this petal for us. Just nice long brush strokes, swiping over it a couple of times. Nothing too fancy. I know you may think that this is like fancy work here, but it's really not too complicated. Alright, and then once you've had that swiped over a couple of times, it's kind of a subtle color shift in color anyway. We're going to do the same thing again, but now with the white. Alright, so bear with me here. But just get a little bit of the white on the tip of your brush again, just like we just did. And again, just along the very outer edge, well again, inner edge of the petal. Just swipe over it a time or two with that white, because now this is going to create another layer of lightness on it, another light highlight. Don't be afraid to get quite a bit of white on there and keep going back for more, right? The more you keep swiping it, the more it's going to blend in anyway. And we do want it to be quite light along this edge here. We're just going to keep swiping it along this outer edge. So now you're going to see that the outside of this petal is pretty dark. And then the inside of it is going to be pretty light, and it kind of blends from one side to the other, right? It blends in between. Which is what we want. That's what's going to make our tulips look really realistic, right? Really nice and pretty too. Now you can wipe your brush off a little bit. You don't really need to wash it completely, because again, acrylic paint, it's thicker and it's not... You don't need to worry about contaminating these other colors, because we're going to end up blending them together on the brush anyway in a minute. You may not know that, but in a minute, yes, we will do some more blending. So next we're going to do, I think this other will be the front petal of the flower. And this time, instead of filling it in with the dark pink, I want to fill it in with our light pink now. Just fill the whole thing in with our light pink. All the way around the edges of our sketch lines, trying our best to stay in the lines, but again, like I said, we can always fix things if we go outside the lines, not a big deal. You can use kind of any brush strokes you like, really, to fill it in, because we're just filling in this section right now. We're not doing any blending or anything. So if you want to do long, really long and sleek kind of brush strokes, or if you want to do short and choppy, whatever kind of brush strokes you want to do here is fine. Alright, and then once we've got that section filled in, again, we're going to take some of this orange color on the end of it, the end of our brush, and we're going to go all along now this side of this petal, like this, again swiping it a couple of times, kind of from this like tippy top of the petal downward. You kind of blend it around at the top though, so it's not such a, yeah, there we go, not like a line, but just swiping it from here on down a couple of times. Kind of keep swiping it towards the center of the petal. So in the center, we've got kind of this like shift from the light pink to the orange, right? In the center, right? Because we swiped it enough, it kind of blended it into the center. Now again, like what we just did, we're gonna take a little bit of white on the tip of our brush. And again, going along this outer edge, like this, with the white just a time or two. So it's just adding some light highlight to it. And don't be afraid to get quite a bit of white on there. Just subtle, subtle highlights. Just like that. All right, now I'm going to wipe my brush a little bit. So we're gonna do a little bit more on this petal. I know, it's all right. Again, we're taking things step by step here, so don't panic at any time. Anytime you need to pause and rewind the video to you guys and rewatch something, totally fine. No judgment on it. You can watch the video at your own pace, right? Take as long as you need on any single section. And literally nobody's going to judge you for it, you guys. We're just here to practice and have fun, right? We're just here to practice painting and have fun. So have a good time, right? So now, down here on this lower ledge, like along here, kind of like from this, what would be like the bottom point of the petal to like maybe around here. We're going to take our dark pink now, and we're going to kind of swipe over it a time or two with the dark pink. It's going to be a little bit more of a stark contrast, a stark change. So maybe not have so much on your brush. I might actually wipe mine a little bit. But we're just going to keep wiping it up and around like this. We're going to keep wiping it towards the center. And that's what's going to help us, there we go, blend it towards the center of this petal. By just swiping over it a couple of times. And I'm not going to go back and get more paint on my brush this time because I had plenty on there of the dark. And just keep going over until your paint is like starting to get pretty dry. And things will start to look a little bit more blended as you get towards the center. Yeah, just like that. Now, what we're going to do is this petal, like kind of behind it, right here. I'm actually gonna get my brush a little bit wet, a little bit wash it because it's getting kind of dry there. There we go. But anytime your brush starts to feel a little bit crunchy, you can always get it a little bit more wet and wipe it off, right? That's how we keep it nice and soft. So this little like triangle shape right here behind that petal we were just working on, we're going to go ahead and fill this in with our orangish color. Right up to the edge of that other one. Trying our best to stay in the lines, but if you go a little bit over it, no biggie. I will show you if you do go over it a little bit. You can always just smoothen out the line, right? If you go a little bit over, just smoothen it out. And no one will actually know that you went over the edge, right? I say smoothen out because we just don't want like a big ooh, right? We don't want to just go ooh, like out and in really sharp or go way over the line. We just want to smoothen it out. And then no one's gonna know that you might have went over the line a little bit because I think I did, right? No biggie. Now, lucky you get a bit of a break. We're not gonna do any blending in that little section. That's a pretty small section. I think we're just gonna leave it be. But this whole section with the curve behind it and this thin line of white right here, yeah, all of this, we're going to go on ahead and fill in with our light pink color. So maybe start off here on the left side where there's a little bit more space to fill in, and work up towards filling in that really thin line there. So it is going to be a little bit tricky. And like here, like if you go over this line a little bit, this white spot here, guys, it doesn't really matter because we're going to fill this in next, so we can always go back over. If you go over the line, you can always fill back over and correct your mistakes, right? I guess I just can't emphasize enough that you can always fix any quote-unquote mistakes you make. I hate to call them mistakes because there's really no mistakes when we're just practicing, right? Now here on this side, I'm going to be really careful, and I'm going to try to go just using the very tip of your brush, you guys, just the very tip to fill in this white section that's really thin. Just the very tip with not a lot of paint on your brush. There we go. And that's really what's going to help you fill that in really nicely. Now, let's say you were to go over, like, let's say I went down here and I filled this, like I went over my line too far, right? If that were the case, this is how you can fix that. See, I went over into this section here a little bit, just for demonstration. We did dark pink here, remember? So I could always just take some dark pink and go back over where I just made a mistake and went too far. I can just paint back over it with the dark pink, back up to where it's supposed to be right here. And no one will literally ever know that I went over the line, right? Because I just fixed it with my other paint. I filled this other petal back out with the dark pink paint. That's an easy way to fill in and fix your mistakes, right? No biggie. I don't ever want you guys to stress about little mishaps like that, right? But now, once we've got this back section done, I want you to go on ahead and use some of our orange on the tip of the brush, and just kind of along like the upper edges here of these like two little humps, little hills, I don't know. These two curves on the top of the petal, we're just going to go over it with the orange a couple of times. Just like we've been doing, just adding a little bit of variation in color there, a little bit of highlight. Then, once you've got that done, I think that should be good. That'll be enough for that section right there. Alright, so now we just gotta fill in this section where there's some white space here. Alright, and to do that, we're going to start off wiping my brush a little bit. You can get yours a little bit more wet if it's starting to get a little bit crunchy. We don't want a crunchy brush. Ugh. Filling in this white section here, what we have left of the white space, down to this really fine point still. But again, it's going to be okay because we're going to hold our brush really nice and gently and just go with the tip of it down to get into that really deep crease, right? We're not going to panic about it. And we're going to fill this whole section here in with our our dark pink to start. Just like we've been doing, just filling in the whole section. See how I'm just barely using the tip of my brush with not a lot of paint on it to get around these really thin areas and getting in these little deep crevices. Remember, if you go over the lines, totally fixable like I showed you over here. If you go a little bit over the lines, you can always fill it back in. Now, once we've got that filled in, this is where our red starts to finally, right, come in, finally. We're going to get a little bit of red on the tip of our brush. And now we're going to take it into this deep crevice. I know, I'm sorry. We have to go over the little crevice again. And just start swiping it upwards. Again, subtle shift in color till about halfway up, and then we can start to kind of blend it out a little bit. Maybe get some more on there if you want to make it even darker. Then here in the center, just swipe over it a couple of times with these like short, choppy brush strokes. Yeah, like that. Now, you got that section all done. Look at you. Awesome job, right? But before we move on to our next tulip here, I actually want to do a couple of highlights, some more highlights with the white. Now that it's dried a bit, we're not going to blend these, all right? We're just going to make some white lines. So you can go ahead and actually clean your brush this time. So it's nice and clean and soft. And comes out to a fine tip. What we want. Now, we're not going to blend these lines, we're just going to make some white lines in a couple of different spots just to add a little bit of highlights to things, alright? Again, nothing too crazy. But first, I want to go kind of from up here down. I kind of already had some white here from when we blended in the white, but I'm going to add a little bit more with a white line going down. There we go, like that. So we can really see the white line all the way down to the tip here. Again, hold the brush really gently, not a whole lot of paint on it at a time, so that you get just the tip touching the surface, right? That's going to help you create some really nice thin lines as we do this. And you can always wipe your brush if you get like a big glob on there or something, and then get some more on the tip of it. Next, we're going to kind of go over the curve of this here, that petal we just made, the last one. Just like that. And then we'll go from, again, down to the end of this little crevice here. And just along this left edge of this petal, the big one right here, all the way to the top, and then you can kind of let it fade out as it comes down the other side. Just like that, just really gently. Then, last one, we're just going to make a little bit of a line right here on this side of this little triangle. Just this side up to the little tippy top of it. Of that little orange triangle that we made. Just like that. And then, take a deep breath, relax, because you have that tulip completely done. Yes. And now, this one actually has less petals to do, so this one's going to be a little bit easier actually. Lucky you, right? So I'm going to clean my brush off, make sure it's nice and wet and pliable still. And moving on to this next flower here. We're going to start with this front petal. And to start, we're going to fill it in completely with our darker pink color that we've got. Just gently filling it all in. And getting it up to the lines as best we can. Again, not trying to go outside the lines, but if we do, oh well. Because we can always fix it, right? Oh, the colors of this picture are like so pretty, you guys. These colors like that we mixed turned out really great. I'm sure yours turned out like great too, right? Maybe it's just the pink and orange hues. I do like pink and orange hues, not gonna lie. Okay. Now, from here, we're going to add some of the dark red to the bottom of this petal, like so, and start blending it upward again, like towards the center, what we did on that other one over there. Just gonna keep swiping it and swiping it upwards towards the center. It's gonna make it real subtle, make it kind of fade from dark to light. From this dark, deep dark red towards the darkish medium pink that we've got going on here at the top. So it's going from dark down here to light up here. Kind of somewhere in the middle is where it fades out. If we keep swiping it, it'll fade out. Yes, it will. Just like that. Then, I'm gonna wipe my brush a little bit. From there, we're going to take our orangish color, orangish hue. We're going to go all along this outer edge, this whole petal, and just swipe over it a couple of times, just like we've been doing. So hopefully by now, since we already did that other tulip over there, the other acrylic tulip, you're feeling a lot more comfortable now, especially in your acrylic painting technique and your painting abilities, right? Whether this is like your first time ever really picking up a paintbrush, total beginner, look at you, rock star. Or if you're a little bit more experienced and you're just honing in on your technique, because practicing is always the best way to get better, right, you guys? Whether it's an easy, quote-unquote easy, painting that we're doing or more advanced painting that we're working on, practice, practice, practice is how you're going to get more comfortable and get ultimately more better with your painting techniques, right? Which is what we want so that you can become an even better painter. Now, haha, look at that. Nice and complete there. So we can move on to this petal here. I'm going to do this one on the outside before we do the one in the middle on the inside. And this one, again, we're going to fill in with our dark pink to start. Before we start adding some lowlights and highlights to it. Just like that. All right. Now, I think for this one, I don't think we're going to add any lowlights to it. I don't think we need to. Instead, I think we're just going to add some of that orange on both sides. Now, both on this inner side, we can go over it a couple times. Getting a nice light highlight on the edge here towards the center. You can go over that as many times as you'd like. And then also on this other side, from at least the middle up, now I'll go all the way down. All the way up and blending that towards the middle. Swipe over it a time or two. And since this is kind of a thin petal, we're blending both sides towards the middle, they might kind of start to blend together in the middle, and that's okay. What I'm going to do to kind of correct that is I'm going to take some of the dark pink, I'm going to make like a line in the middle, and then I'm just going to blend it a couple times, straight up and down, right? So that we still have a distinct line of the darker pink in the middle, in between the two blended orange sections. Again, really subtle shift in color here, but just like that. And then I'm going to actually clean my brush a little bit now because I've got a lot of paint on there. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill in this middle section now, and yes, we've got a deep crevice to worry about here. Not worry. Don't worry. Not to worry. We can do it. All right? We got this. We already did it once. You can do it again. We can always do it again. So we're going to fill in this whole section now with our light pink. Go for it, you guys. You guys got it. And actually, if you're kind of struggling to get in those deep spots, you can always, what I like to do is I kind of like to flip my brush and hold it from the top. That kind of helps me a little bit. Or you can always move the direction of your picture, right? You can move it around if you want to do it from this way. You can do it from this angle. Just to help you get in those little crevices a little bit easier if you're having a little bit of trouble. Now, once we've got that all filled in, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the orange along the curves of the top, just like we did on our other one, our other tulip, just going over it a time or two. And then, after that, I'm actually going to take some of the dark pink on the tip of my brush, and I'm going to go over the crevice again with that dark pink and start blending it towards the center. Again, just like we did on the other one, so it's not a whole big deal, right? Just getting a little bit of a low light down here. And just blending it up towards the top, towards the center. Until the brush gets pretty dry, and then you can just kind of flick it a couple times and it'll fade out towards the top. Yeah, like that. Now, before we move on, I do want to do a little bit of our white lines here on this tulip as well. Just a couple of them. So just get a little bit of the white just on the tip of your brush. And I want to go along all of this outside edge of this leftmost petal with just some thin white lines along the outer edge, all the way to the top, and it kind of fades out at the top. just like that. And then another one along the inner edge of this other, the rightmost petal now. So basically the same thing we did on that petal, but just flipped, right? Just on this inside up to the very top. Now, go ahead and clean your brush off really well. We are done with our acrylic tulip petals. Now we just need to finish up the green section, the stems and leaves we've got going on down here of these before we go back and switch back to watercolor, and then you'll be done, right? Get excited, you guys. You're getting there. You're getting there. I promise you're getting there. So to start on these little stems here, it's gonna be nice and a little bit easier than the petals, honestly. I want you to take your green, whatever green you've got, and we're going to fill in this stem here, this whole one here, right, with this green to start. Again, trying to stay inside the lines as best you can, but if you go a little bit over them, you can still smooth them out like what I'm doing here. I kind of went over it a little bit. Just using the tip of the brush as best we can to fill it all in. And then, once you've got it filled in, we are going to take a little bit of white on the tip of the brush, and from the top around here down, we're going to swipe some of that white in a time or two, just like we did on the petals, just swiping it in along this edge from the top down. Doesn't have to be a whole lot, just a little bit, just a really subtle highlight here on the stem. Just like that. Then we're going to do the same thing with this stem here. Fill it all in with our base green to start. You know, these are pretty thin, kind of like those deep crevices on the petals, so we have to be kind of careful. But again, you can hold your brush a little bit differently or kind of flip your picture around if you need to. All the way down to the end, and then it kind of fades off, right? Now, again, taking just a little bit of white on the tip of the brush, we're just going to go from the top along the right side down a couple of times. Just a couple of times, you don't have to go crazy with it. Now, continuing on, we're going to fill in this like top leaf here, this like top triangle. This is another leaf behind the front leaf. You can't tell, right? But you will tell once we're done with it because we're going to paint it in and it's going to look like it's actually in the back. So this back leaf here, this triangle, we're going to fill in with our plain green. And then once you got this one filled in, again, just take a little bit of the white and along this right edge, we'll just go over it a time or two. Just like that. And now, finally, for this last petal, this is going to be a little bit different. Without cleaning or wiping your brush, if you already did, that's fine. Just get a little bit more of your base green on there. We're going to dip it directly in our white, and we're going to get quite a bit of white on there, actually. Quite a bit of white. Now, we're going to apply this white right to the page, but since we already had a little bit of green on there, as we apply it to the page, it's going to create this really, really light green. You can kind of swirl what you've got on your brush on there. All right. So we're mixing a new color directly on the page. That's why this is a little bit different. Now, with your new color on the page, we're going to go ahead and fill in this whole section. If you need more paint, get more white and bring it in. See why I said this is a little bit different? Because we're mixing the color directly on the page. This is a really good acrylic paint technique to know and to have. Right? Because it's not always, if we were to mix every single color directly on our palette that we want to use, we might as well like have a billion palettes, right? Because sometimes there's so many colors in a picture that like it's just not viable for us to mix every single one. Sometimes we want to mix new colors as we go. And to do that, we want to do it directly on the page. Nothing wrong with that. A bunch of artists always use that tactic. So we're just mixing a new type of green right on here. We're just filling in this whole section with it. Just like that. And we're not even going to do any blending in this section because you already blended some new colors, so I think we're doing pretty good. Just be careful along this edge of the stem we already did so that we don't go too far over it. Other than that, you're golden. You're golden, pony boy, right? You're golden. Now, yay! Our acrylic painting portion is complete. Yay, give yourself a huge pat on the back if you didn't already, right? Gonna clean our brushes off, get them nice and wet because we're going to move back into watercolor gear. I'm going to move my acrylic paints to the side again and bring my watercolor paints back in to the picture. Literally, we're going to move them back into the picture. So, again, get your brush nice and wet and clean. Now, we're going to finish off all of these tulips that we started up here. And to do that, you get to pick, again, whichever color you want to do for each of them. But we're just going to make the center petal of them, right? Because these are the two outer petals, and we just need one to go kind of in the center and to overlap with them. This is why we waited for our paint to dry, you guys, because now we're going to overlap and we didn't want them to blend together. So now they should be pretty much dry. I mean, yours, you can check to see if they're dry, but they should be dry, right? You might have a couple of wet spots, like right here. It's a little bit wet for me. If you want to, you can dab those with a napkin if you're afraid of ruining them as we go, or you can just let them be, because they probably won't blend too awful much. But now, for each one of these, you get to pick whichever color you want to make for the center petal. I suggest doing a different color than you originally did. Like this one, I originally did dark pink, it looks like, with some highlights of something else on it, I don't know what. So I'm going to take my light pink now. Get it really, really wet with that light pink. I'm going to go over it. I'm going to create a center petal. Just like this. And this is another time, as you fill in each of these with a center petal, that you can play around with how wet of a watercolor you want to use, right? This watercolor is pretty, very, very watery, so it's going to be really translucent when I apply it over the other petals that are already there, which is totally fine if that's what you want. That one's kind of migrating downwards for some reason. Okay. But, however, if you do want to thicken them up a little bit, you can add a little bit of acrylic paint into it. So I am going to bring my acrylic paint back over here, actually. And again, this is for you to kind of play around. So one way you can do this is get a little bit of acrylic paint on your brush and then mix it in to whatever corresponding watercolor. And then apply it to your page. And it's going to make your paint a little bit less translucent, if that's what you want. It's one way to thicken up our watercolors. Or, again, cleaning it off now, as I move on to the next color here, you can just use the really, really wet, watery watercolor and make some thinner petals. We do kind of want them to overlap with the other ones that we've already got on there. We're making kind of just a big kind of oval in the center, right? But it's pretty much up to you, however you want to do it. I'm going to try this one with a little bit of my dark pink. I'm going to get some of the acrylic on my brush and mix it in with the watercolor over here, make it a little bit thicker. Ooh, that's really pretty. Sorry, I got kind of excited. And then with this one, I'll make it a little bit thinner again. Sometimes with watercolor, you really don't know what you're going to get until you put it right on the page, right? It's not as predictable as acrylic paint is. But then, once you fill all of your center petals in, you can also go back and, with either really wet watercolor or, again, using our method of thickening it up with some of the acrylic paint into the watercolor and applying it, you can add some like little highlights to each of your flowers, like say this. Make a little lines on them, little extra things, just like this. You can even, now that we're getting like pretty close to the end here, you can even experiment with mixing these three colors together, like right on your brush or in another little spot if you want to be really creative and applying it to the page. Remember, watercolor is really for just playing around. Like, let's be honest. Because we can't really control watercolor. We can control acrylic paint pretty well. But watercolor, we don't always know what we're going to get and we can't always control it. So it's a good thing sometimes to just play around and see what you get. But then, once you pretty much got your tulips, your watercolor tulips, exactly, or just about exactly, right? Because we can't really control exactly how they're going to turn out. But once you get them pretty satisfactory to what you want them to look like, I'm going to move my acrylic paint out of the way again. We just have one last step to do, and that is, of course, filling in our stems with our green acrylic, or excuse me, watercolor made from watercolor paint. So for this step, and this is going to be pretty easy. Again, just make sure you've got a nice wet and clean brush because we don't want to contaminate our pinks and our orange hues into our green. Just gonna get some of that green on your brush. Get it nice and on there. And we're just gonna make some lines. Easy lines all the way down the page. Just like this. And again, you get quite a bit of freedom as to how you want to make your stems look. And like up here, you'll probably want to make it look like it's behind our acrylic painting. We don't want to ruin our acrylic painting there. But you can also make it look like it's coming like down through here. Yeah, like that. Just for each of your little tulips. Give them some nice stems. You can also, this is optional, but if you'd like, you can make it look like there's some little leaves coming off of your watercolor tulips too. Like this. That's really all it is. I don't even know if I've got another place. I guess I could kind of fit one in here. Maybe one over here. But again, I didn't sketch out these lines for you, so you have total freedom as to where, or if you even put like leaves into your stems and such. But after that, you guys, you can clean off your brush. You can feel completely satisfied, right? And be proud of yourself for your work today. This was an awesome, I had a lot of fun with this class. I hope you guys had fun too. But yes, I should also probably say you're done now. All right, once you get that all done and you're satisfied with your work, satisfied with your painting, you're completely done. So again, as always, I hope you guys really enjoyed this class. You can always let me know if you did. And I hope to see you in our next petals and flowers, or flowers and petals, really, painting course. But until then, happy painting, home dogs.